The air in the stellarium was a lie. It was scrubbed, filtered, and chilled to a precise neutrality, a blank canvas upon which the scents and subtle pressures of diplomacy could be painted. It smelled of nothing, which, to Elias Thorne, was the most unnerving scent of all. He stood on the polished chrome disc of the human delegation platform, the cool metal a faint anchor through the thin soles of his regulation boots. Across the chamber, on a raised dais of what looked like living, pearlescent coral, stood his opponent. Xyler Prime, scion of the Lumina Concordance, was everything Elias was not. Where Elias was compact and still, Xyler was a symphony of elegant motion. His tall, slender frame, draped in robes of woven light, seemed to drink the ambient illumination of the chamber and refract it into a soft, personal aurora. Two primary arms were crossed over his chest in a gesture of relaxed authority, while a secondary, more delicate pair of manipulators, located just below his ribcage, drifted lazily in the air, tracing patterns only he could see. His face was a smooth, ageless sculpture of bone and cartilage, lacking a mouth in the human sense, but featuring a complex series of resonating membranes below two large, liquid black eyes. But it was the unseen that defined him. Even from 30 paces, Elias felt the psychic and pheromonic pressure. It wasn't an attack, not yet. It was an announcement, a constant, low-frequency broadcast of superiority, ancient lineage, and unshakable confidence. The pheromones were a complex cocktail that whispered inadequacy into the primitive, mammalian centers of Elias' brain, suggesting deference and awe. The telepathic component was more refined, a subtle coloration of the psychic space between them. A background hum that suggested agreeing with Xyler was the most natural, logical, and peaceful course of action. Elias had trained for this. For 3 years at the Diplomatic Corps Academy, he had endured exposure simulations, gradually building a tolerance, learning to wall off his own mind. He couldn't block the signals entirely, no human could, but he could recognize them for what they were, an invasive, biological form of rhetoric. He could identify the feeling of manufactured awe and file it away, separate from his own thoughts. He could feel the suggestion of his own inferiority and observe it with clinical detachment. High above them, behind a one-way pane of polarized crystal, sat the adjudicators and their fellow students. Kalen, the grizzled human ex-ambassador who served as their primary instructor, would be there, his face an impassive mask. And there would be others. Vuln, the hulking nice strategist who communicated in seismic frequencies. The twin chitinid queens, whose collective consciousness analyzed problems with terrifying speed. And of course, other members of the Lumina Concordance, watching one of their own demonstrate the inherent superiority of their caste. A soft chime resonated through the stellarium, signaling the start of the simulation. A holographic star field bloomed into existence around them, the contested territory at its heart glowing a baleful red. The Ethelred Veil, an asteroid belt rich in rare earth metals and unstable isotopes, claimed by both the Terran Alliance and the Lumina Concordance. Xyler Prime's voice filled the chamber. It was not a product of vocal cords but of his resonating membranes, a sound like cello strings and wind chimes playing in perfect harmony. "Delegate Thorne," the sound began, already thick with condescension. "It is the magnanimous wish of the Lumina Concordance to resolve this matter without recourse to cruder forms of persuasion. We have laid our claim, a claim rooted in historical precedent and cosmic justice. It is a truth we feel in the very fabric of spacetime, a truth, I fear, to which your senses are tragically numb." A wave of pheromones washed over Elias, carrying with it a profound sense of legitimacy for Xyler's cause. A telepathic whisper, light as a feather, brushed against his mental shields. "You are out of your depth, little primate. Yield and save yourself the humiliation." Elias ignored it. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of neutral respect. "Your Eminence," he said, his own voice deliberately flat and devoid of emotion. "The Terran Alliance acknowledges the Concordance's interest. However, our claim is based on the universally accepted principle of first discovery and proximity. The Veil is demonstrably closer to our colony on Kepler-18 b than to any established Concordance territory." Xyler's secondary arms twitched in what Elias had learned was a gesture of amusement. "Proximity, discovery. Such quaint physical concepts. You speak of maps and measurements, of photons striking a sensor for the first time. We speak of destiny, of the rightful order of things. Our claim predates your probe's arrival. It was foreseen by our empaths 3 generations ago. A foresight not logged in any public registry, I believe, Elias countered calmly. The registry is a concession to species like your own. Xyler's voice was smooth as polished jade. A simplification for those who cannot perceive the deeper currents. You rely on crude vibrations in the air and patterns of light, while we commune with the universe's intent. To ask us to file our perceptions like a shipping manifest is insulting. The pheromonal wash intensified, now carrying a distinct note of righteous indignation. The psychic pressure increased, tinged with pity for Elia's limited existence. This was the opening gambit. Xyler was establishing the rules of engagement. His abilities were a valid, even superior, form of evidence, while Elias' data-driven approach was primitive and irrelevant. The other lumina in the observation deck would be nodding in agreement. To them, this was self-evident. Elias let the silence stretch for a moment, his eyes fixed on the lumina noble. He wasn't looking at the flowing robes or the distracting, gentle sway of his body. He was watching the area around Xyler's eyes and the subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm of his posture. He had spent hundreds of hours studying lumina biology and micro-expressions. He was looking for the machine beneath the god. "I mean no insult, Your Eminence," Elias said, his tone still perfectly even. "I am merely trying to reconcile your claim with the framework of interstellar law that both our peoples have agreed to uphold. Help me understand. The concordance is a signatory to the Cygnus Accords, correct?" "Of course," Xyler replied, a hint of boredom in his chimes. "We uplifted the Accords from their brutish origins into a document of genuine galactic principle. Article 7, Section 3 of the Accords explicitly states that all territorial claims must be based on verifiable physical data, including but not limited to sensor logs, probe telemetry, and spectrographic analysis." Elias recited from memory. "It makes no provision for empathic foresight. A clause written for the lowest common denominator," Xyler dismissed with a wave of a primary hand, "to prevent squabbling among the less aware species. It was never intended to constrain a civilization like ours, whose perception of reality is fundamentally more complete. You cannot hold a being who sees in 3 dimensions to the rules of a being who sees only in 2. The arrogance was breathtaking. He was openly admitting that the law only applied to others. Elias gave a slow, deliberate nod. He made a small note on the datapad strapped to his wrist. "I see," Elias said. "So the Concordance's position is that its innate abilities grant it an exemption from the laws it has agreed to." Xyler's luminescence seemed to brighten. He had backed Elias into a philosophical corner, or so he thought. "Exemption is a crude word, I would say. A more nuanced interpretation. We abide by the spirit of the law, which is to ensure cosmic order. Our very nature ensures we are aligned with that order. The letter of the law is for those who might otherwise stray." The telepathic whisper returned, sharper this time. "Do you see now? Your logic is a cage. We are free." "Thank you for the clarification, Your Eminence," Elias said, making another note. "Let us, for the moment, set aside the Accords and discuss the historical context. You mentioned a claim rooted in history. Your official petition states that the initial survey of the systems adjacent to the Ethelred Vale was conducted by the Concordance vessel, the Starlight Echo, under the authority of the 9th dynastic mandate." "Is correct," Xyler affirmed. "A foundational moment in our expansion into that quadrant. Could you clarify the precise celestial year of the 9th mandate's ratification?" Elias asked. The question was simple, a matter of public record. Xyler's resonating membranes vibrated with a sound of condescending patience. "The year 32,704 by your Terran calendar, a date of great significance." "Indeed," Elias agreed. "And the Concordance's historic non-aggression and trade pact with the Glyptodan hegemony, which first established the formal borders of your expansion in that quadrant. That was signed in the year 32,690, was it not?" A flicker of something, a momentary hesitation before Xyler's melodious response. "Yes, another triumph of Lumina diplomacy." I seem to have found a small point of confusion, Your Eminence, for which I'm sure there is a simple explanation, Elias said, his voice retaining its placid, analytical tone. The treaty with the Glyptotan hegemony, signed in 32,690, specifically cedes all exploratory rights in the systems containing the Ethelred Veil to the hegemony in perpetuity. The Ninth Mandate, which you claim authorized your survey, was not ratified until 14 years later. How could a mandate from 32,704 authorize a survey in territory that had been ceded to another power 14 years prior? The air in the stellarium shifted. The constant pheromonic pressure wavered, like a radio signal encountering static. Xyler's secondary arms, which had been drifting elegantly, stilled. A minor chronological discrepancy, Xyler chimed, the melody slightly strained. The scribes who transcribed the petition were likely in error regarding the specific mandate. It would have been the 8th mandate, of course. A trivial clerical mistake. Of course, Elias echoed softly, making another note. He did not point out that the 8th mandate predated the Concordance's development of faster-than-light drives capable of reaching that quadrant. He would save that. It was the first thread. He had pulled it and it had held. He let the silence hang again, a vacuum that Xyler felt compelled to fill. Your focus on these minutiae is telling, Delegate Thorne, Xyler said, attempting to regain the offensive. His pheromones surged, now laced with a chemical signature meant to induce confusion and self-doubt in his target. You seek to build a cage of irrelevant data while ignoring the profound truth of the matter. The veil is ours by right. I only seek to understand the foundations of that right, Elias replied. You have presented history and law as two pillars of your claim. I am merely testing their strength. Let us move to a more practical matter. The economics of the Ethelred Veil. He shifted the topic, not allowing Xyler to dwell on the first contradiction. The strategy was to build a web, not to win a single point. Your proposal outlines a plan for ethically harmonious resource extraction, Elias quoted. It promises minimal ecological disruption to the asteroid habitats. This is a noble goal and one the Concordance is famous for. Xyler seized the lifeline. Indeed. Unlike the rapacious strip mining favored by less enlightened species, our methods are symbiotic. We harvest only what is needed, and we ensure the delicate ecosystems that evolve even on barren rock are preserved. It is a costly but necessary expression of our philosophy. His voice regained its resonant confidence. The pheromones smoothed out, broadcasting sincerity and wisdom. And your projections show a net profit from the Veil's resources of approximately 12 trillion Terran credits in the first decade of operation, Elias continued. A conservative estimate, Xyler agreed. I have run the numbers, Your Eminence, Elias said, his gaze unwavering. My team analyzed the cost of the symbiotic extraction technologies your people use. They are, as you say, costly. In fact, to implement those protocols on the scale required for the Ethelred Veil, with its unique isotopic instabilities, would necessitate an operational budget increase of, conservatively, 53% over standard extraction. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Your own economic models, which are publicly available, show that such an increase would not reduce your profit margin. It would eliminate it entirely. It would, in fact, create a net loss of approximately 4 trillion credits over that same decade. Elias looked up from his datapad. So my question is, how does the Lumina Concordance intend to subsidize this noble but profoundly unprofitable endeavor? Or is there another, more efficient extraction method you plan to use, one not mentioned in the official proposal? The silence that followed was different. It was not a pause, it was a void. The pheromonal output from Xyler Prime stuttered violently. Elias could feel it, a chaotic jumble of signals. Confidence, anger, panic, and a desperate attempt to project calming sincerity, all mixing into a nauseating psychic sludge. High in the gallery, Elias imagined Kalen leaning forward slightly. He could picture the Chitinid queens processing the logic, their collective minds finding the flaw. He could see the other Lumina nobles shifting uncomfortably. Their scion was not merely being debated. He was being systematically shown to be incoherent. Xyler's luminescence flickered, dimming for a split second before returning with a forced brightness. Your calculations are simplistic, he finally chimed, the harmony fractured. You fail to account for long-term ancillary benefits, the, the spiritual value, the unity of purpose it will engender. Spiritual value is not a currency the galactic market accepts for the payment of equipment leases and labor stipends. Your Eminence, Elias said, his voice still maddeningly gentle. You presented an economic argument. That argument appears to be built on a paradox. He made another note, a historical impossibility, a financial paradox. The web was growing. You are playing games, Xyler suddenly flared, his secondary arms clenching into tight fists. A wave of pure, raw anger washed from him, a pheromonal and telepathic shriek. Insolent primate. You know nothing. Elias remained placid, the eye of the storm. He had weathered worse in the simulators. He let the psychic tantrum wash over him, recognizing it as a sign of desperation. The god was revealing the frightened animal within. I am merely asking questions, Elias said, once the outburst subsided. It is the foundation of my diplomatic tradition. To understand, we must question. And now I must question the very foundation of your entire position. The bedrock upon which your caste, your authority, your entire civilization is built. This was the most dangerous phase. He was no longer attacking the claim. He was attacking Xyler's identity. Your Eminence, you have spoken of your perception of feeling the truth of things. Your people, the Lumina, revere what you call the unbroken chain of truth. It is the core of your philosophy, is it not? The belief that truth is a singular, tangible, perceivable cosmic force. Xyler, seemingly desperate to get back to a topic where he felt superior, grasped the offered branch. It is everything, he resonated, the chimes deep and solemn, a hymn to his own beliefs. It is the light that guides us. It separates us from the chaos of falsehood that blinds so much of the galaxy. We do not simply believe the truth, Delegate Thorne, we perceive it, directly. It is an organ, a sense, as fundamental as sight. Then help me, a blind man, to see, Elias said, his voice soft, almost sympathetic. If truth is a singular, unbroken entity, a perfect chain, how can it contain the fractures you have presented to me today? We have a historical statement that is impossible. We have a financial statement that is a paradox. These are not matters of interpretation, Your Eminence. They are mutually exclusive realities. A thing cannot happen before it is authorized. A project cannot be both wildly profitable and ruinously expensive. These are not links in a chain. They are shatter points. He took a step forward, his presence on the chrome disk seeming to grow. How can an unbroken chain of truth be constructed from so many broken, contradictory pieces? Please explain it to me. If your perception of truth is so pure, why is the testimony you have given so demonstrably, so logically false? Xyler Prime stood perfectly still. The soft aurora around him seemed to shrink, clinging to his robes like a shroud. The psychic pressure was gone, the pheromonal broadcast silenced. All that remained was the sterile, neutral air of the stellarium. For the first time, Elias could smell the faint ozone from the holographic projectors. The Lumina noble looked up, past Elias, toward the observation gallery. He was looking for his peers, for reassurance, for a shared glance of solidarity. But Elias knew what he would find. He would see other Lumina, their own perfect perception of truth forcing them to acknowledge the cascade of illogic emanating from their chosen champion. He would see their cold, analytical stares. In their culture, which prized truth as a palpable essence, to be caught in a web of verifiable falsehoods was not just a failure of diplomacy. It was a moral and spiritual collapse. A sign of sickness. Xyler was no longer a scion. He was an anomaly, an embarrassment. He was alone, his beautiful, liquid black eyes fixed on Elias. The resonating membranes below them trembled, but no sound emerged. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. It was the sound of a worldview crumbling. Finally, Elias delivered the coup de grace. He kept his voice low, almost intimate, as if sharing a secret rather than delivering a final judgment. There is one last thing, Your Eminence, he said. At the very beginning of this session, a minor point, you mentioned your personal familiarity with the Ethelred Veil. You stated, and I quote, that you personally supervised the deep-range survey from the bridge of my command vessel, the Will of the Conquered. a small detail meant to add personal authority to your claim. Elias paused. But the public flight logs of the will of the conquered, a document your own people published to demonstrate transparency, show that during the entire 6-month period of that survey, your vessel was docked at Lumina Prime. You were personally presiding over the vernal conclave. You were never there. It wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't a miscalculation. It was a simple, direct, personal falsehood. Xylar Prime made a sound then. A soft, fricative hiss like sand escaping a crack in a stone. It was a sound of utter defeat. The secondary arms, once so expressive, hung limply at his sides. The light of his robes seemed to have been extinguished from within, leaving them a dull, lifeless gray. The chimes came, but they were weak, discordant. All the arrogance, all the superiority was gone. It was the sound of a child asking a question in the dark. How? The sound was barely a whisper in the vast chamber. How? Did you know? You are sense-deaf. You are psychically inert. You cannot perceive intent. You cannot taste a lie on the air. I shielded my thoughts. I modulated my emissions. How did you know I was departing from the truth? Elias allowed himself a single, slow blink. He looked at the broken noble, then let his gaze sweep up to the one-way crystal of the observation gallery, knowing they were all listening, hanging on his every word. You are correct, Your Eminence, Elias said, his voice returning to its neutral, almost didactic tone. I cannot read your mind. I cannot smell your sincerity. The universe does not whisper its truths to me. I have only the evidence you choose to give me. Your words, your data, and your biology. He tapped his own temple. You believe your higher functions, your telepathy and pheromones make you superior. You have spent generations cultivating them. But in doing so, you have forgotten the machine that runs them. The ancient, autonomous systems that you share with every complex life form in the galaxy. You can control the thoughts you broadcast, but you cannot fully control the body that has to generate those thoughts. Every time you consciously constructed a statement that you knew to be untrue, your mind experienced a flicker of cognitive dissonance. A micro-stressor, a tiny, internal conflict between the truth you knew and the lie you spoke. You are so practiced at hiding the psychic echo of that conflict that you've forgotten it has a physical component. Elias took another step forward. Your respiratory rate, normally a steady 16 cycles per minute, hitched to 19 whenever you fabricated a fact. Your tertiary manipulators, which drift so elegantly when you are at ease, clenched into fists no larger than my thumb for a fraction of a second. Almost imperceptible. But there was one tell that was as clear as a ship's beacon in a storm. He locked his eyes with Xylar's. You blinked. A wave of confusion emanated from Xylar, a pure, unshielded psychic ripple. An average, healthy Lumina at rest blinks once every 7.3 seconds, Elias stated, the numbers rolling off his tongue with the certainty of a physicist reciting a constant. I observed you for the first 5 minutes of this session. When you spoke of your people's greatness, when you stated facts you believed to be true, you maintained that average perfectly. You were a living metronome. When you lied, Elias continued, his voice dropping slightly, when you knowingly fabricated information, when you claimed the 9th mandate authorized your survey, when you insisted your economic plan was profitable, when you lied about being on the bridge of your ship, your blink rate tripled. For the precise duration of the false statement, you blinked once every 2.1 seconds. A frantic, unconscious flutter of your eyelids, a biological release of the stress of maintaining a deception. Broadcast every single lie with a signal a child could read. I didn't need telepathy, I just needed to pay attention. He gestured to the complex web of notes on his datapad, the tangled contradictions and logical fallacies. The rest, Elias Thorne concluded, his voice echoing in the profound silence of the chamber, was just arithmetic. A loud, final chime sounded, signaling the end of the simulation. The holographic starfield vanished. The lights came up to their full, unforgiving brightness. Xylar Prime stood on his dais, a statue of gray robes and shattered pride, his black eyes staring into a distance only he could see, a universe where all his certainties had just been proven to be illusions. The instructor's voice, Kalen's gravelly baritone, crackled through the speakers, devoid of any warmth. Diplomacy is not a contest of esoteric power. It is the art of reality management. Delegate Thorne managed reality. Science Xyler Prime allowed his reality to be dismantled by his own fabrications. Lesson over. Elias turned and walked off the chrome disc, his boots making quiet, solid sounds on the floor. He didn't look at Xyler again. He didn't need to. He had deconstructed a god by observing a tick. As he walked toward the exit, the doors sliding open to receive him, he passed the other alien students who were now filing out of the gallery. They parted before him, the chitinid queens retracting their forelimbs, the nice strategist giving a low rumble of what might have been respect. They looked at him differently now. The primitive, sense-deaf human was no longer an object of pity. He was an object of fear. He represented a kind of intelligence they had never considered, the kind that didn't need to read minds because it could read the universe in its raw, unfiltered state. The established order of things, the hierarchy of telepaths over talkers, of empaths over observers, had not just been questioned. It had been proven dangerously, fundamentally flawed. And in the quiet hum of the corridor, Elias Thorne knew that this single, academic simulation would send ripples far beyond the walls of the academy, into the vast, silent diplomacy of the stars.